President, please be seated. The court is now in session. As we scheduled yesterday, today we will continue to hear the testimony who will be questioned by the defense team for Nguyen Chia. Before I hand the floor to the defense, Ms. Sakoboti, could you report the attendance of the parties and individuals to the proceeding? Sakoboti, Mr. President, all parties to the proceeding are present except the accused Ieng Sari, who is present in the holding cell downstairs. He requests to waive his direct presence through his counsel in today's proceeding. The letter of waiver has been submitted to the greffier. As for the reserve witness, that is TCW 609, is present in the waiting room to be called by the chamber. The witness confirms to his knowledge he has no relationship by blood or by marriage to the three accused or any of the civil parties recognized by the chamber. The witness already took an oath on the 14th of August 2012. The chamber will now decide the request by Ieng Sari. The chamber received the request dated 15 August 2012 through its counsel to waive his direct presence in the courtroom and instead to follow it through a remote means for the whole day proceeding. Su Sam, the treating doctor of the accused at the ECCC detention facility, has examined the accused and observes that he is fatigued, easily get exhausted while during the movement, and he recommends that the accused shall be allowed to follow the proceeding in the holding cell downstairs. And as Ieng Sari already requested to waive his direct presence in the courtroom due to his health, and as observed by the doctor that he could physically and mentally follow the proceedings from a holding cell and that he can communicate directly with his defense team, the chamber thus agrees to the request by Ieng Sari to waive his direct presence in the courtroom and allows him to follow it through a remote means from the holding cell downstairs. That applies for the entire day. AV Booth, you are instructed to link the proceeding to the holding cell downstairs so that Mr. Ieng Sari can follow it. The floor is now given to the defense team for Nguyen Chia to continue putting questions to the witness. Defense team, and you are also reminded that your questions shall be appropriate and relevant to the facts alleged. For the purpose of ascertaining the truth and in order to prove the existence or otherwise of guilt of your client, and that the results of your questions shall be the base for the Chamber's consideration. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honours. Good morning to everyone in and around the courtroom, and especially good morning to you, Mr. Soon Sukun. Yesterday, we were discussing the history of the funk and the grunk, and we had spoken about a telegram that was sent by the American embassy, and which identified several persons involved in the funk and the grunk. One of them was you, and you confirmed that indeed you were a member of the Funk Central Committee. And one of them was Mr. Kiet Chun, and you confirmed that Mr. Kiet Chun was indeed the secretary of the Funk Politburo. We spoke a little bit about the Politburo yesterday. And you have spoken about this Politburo before, especially on August 8 in court, on page 34 of the English transcript, lines 8 to 12, and page 28 of the Khmer transcript, lines 2 to 5. You said the following: in both Funk and Grunk, there were respective organizational management. As Funk, it was a political organization. It had a central committee, and above the central committee, there was a Politburo of the central committee. And Samdek Ben-Nut was the chairman of this committee. This is what you stated on August the 8th, and my question to you is simply, is this the same Politburo that Kiet Chun was a member of in 1971?
Kiet Chun was a candidate member of the Politburo of the Funk at the time.
Thank you. And then the last question with regard to this telegram. You may remember that yesterday I read out to you the first page of the telegram, and this telegram stated that people that were marked with an asterisk were those people that had been dared by Prince Sihanouk to form a government in the early 60s. These were, in the words of the telegrams, the people that have been publicly described as leftists, extreme leftists, and subversives. Mr. Kiet Chun was indeed marked with an asterisk, and my question to you is, was Mr. Kiet Chun one of those 34 individuals that was dared by the prince to form a government already in the early 1960s?
I did not have that knowledge. At that time, I was still studying in France.
Thank you. Then I'll move on to the next topic, and that is a bit later in time. It's the evacuation of Phnom Penh. You've already described that you arrived in Phnom Penh in May 1975, so after the actual evacuation took place. But when you arrived in the city, do you remember whether the city was totally calm at the time, or whether there was still sporadic fighting or gunfights?
On the day that I entered Phnom Penh, which was the 25th of May 1975, there were no people in the city. It was calm. there were some female workers who were transporting rice and put them on the boat.
I would like to read an excerpt to you from a book by your former wife, Laurence Pic, and she has written a book, Beyond the Horizon, and I would like to display the relevant sections on the screen. And the document number is IS 3.7, English ERN is 00754756278, French ERN is 001-03372 till 78 as well. Khmer ERN is 001-03479 till 72. And with your permission, Mr. President, I would like to show the Khmer version on the screen, and I have a hard copy of both the French and the Khmer version for the witness to look at.
Yes, you may proceed. Court officer, could you deliver the hard copy document for the witness examination?
And while the witness is reading the hard copy, I will read out the relevant excerpt in English. And I quote, it's on page 53 of the English version and page 60 of the French version and page 96 of the Khmer version. And I quote, an important post-war step had been surmounted with the new rice harvest, but the security problem remained. Under the seal of secrecy, combatants often reported that arrests were taking place and gunshots were erupting night and day in various areas. Following the evacuation, Phnom Penh was searched from top to bottom to drive out any remaining rebels. Several weeks after the liberation, some were still found in hideouts stocked with provisions. The young ones found it amusing to see that their compatriots, hidden from the sun, had turned white. End of quote. And Mr. Soonsakun, my question to you is, does this refresh your memory? It may be that you were not in the city at the time because you arrived only on the 25th of May. But if you read this excerpt, does it refresh your memory as to possible combatants that were still hiding in Phnom Penh?
As far as I know, the statement as it was put by my ex-wife was a hearsay from those combatants at that time, as they were talking to one another, and she overheard it. I also overheard that kind of statement. That the young ones found it amusing because they saw those people had turned white. There were not many of those former combatants. There were only a few, and there were some civilians as well.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. That is a clear answer. Then I would like to go a bit further ahead in time and talk about the setting up of Office B1, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And you have declared that you did so together with a certain Bodai, who was an engineer from the Soviet Union, and with Mr. Kiet Chun. And I would like to show you a document, and it's the book you yourself wrote. It's called The Odyssey of a Khmer Rouge Intellectual. The document number is IS 3.9 and also E number E 3.40. And the English ERN is 008-13077 till 103. And the French ERN is 000-78986 till 39. And the Khmer ERN is 00583-604 until 636. And with your permission, Mr. President, I would like to show the Khmer version on the screen, and we have both a French and a Khmer copy for the witness.
Yes, you may proceed, court officer. Could you obtain the hard copy document from the counsel for the witness examination?
And like before, I will read out the relevant excerpt, which can be found on English ERN 008130084, Khmer ERN 005836113, and the French ERN 000-78999. And I quote, "When In Sopiap joined the Ministry of Information, I remained with Kit Chun and Keo Bori, an engineer who had returned from Moscow, to reorganize the ministry. Throughout June 1975, we lived in the Pink House next to the Royal Palace. It was a beautiful villa which belonged to Princess Po, one of Samdech Norodom Sihanouk's wives. During the period of the Khmer Republic, it housed the office of the military attaché for the Kingdom of Thailand. The three of us, Kiet Chun, Bori, and me, formed the nucleus of what later became the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Democratic Kampuchea. Mr. Ieng Sary, our superior, came to visit us from time to time." My question, Mr. Sun Sukun, is what did you mean when you stated that the three of you, Kiet Chun, Buri, and yourself, formed the nucleus of what later became the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
The three of us were assigned by Ieng Sary in order to obtain information from various other sources, in particular from the foreign broadcast, radio broadcast that is. And we shall analyze the broadcast and report it to him on a monthly basis regarding the situations. And the report was also based on our analysis on the resistance by the Cambodian people, as at that time Cambodia was not yet a democratic Cambodia. It was still in the resistance period. We shall also analyze the situation of the newly liberated country. And within the group, Kiet Chun was the group leader, and he had to submit the report to Ieng Sary on a monthly basis.
And when you use the words nucleus, what do you mean exactly by that? Do you mean that you were the first persons to start the foreign ministry, or is there another meaning to the word?
It means that we monitor the situation in particular the international situation and its development. In particular in its relation to the development of our resistance inside the country after the liberation of 17 April 1975. And based on the analysis of that situation, the result would be an aid for the leadership in order to determine their foreign policy of a newly established state.
Thank you. And then, if I can read to you an excerpt from the same document which you should already have before you. It is on page 15 of the English version, and the English ERN is 008130091, and the Khmer ERN is 005836621 to 22, and the French ERN is 000790013. If the court assistant can assist. And I will read just one line from this page. And on this page you have written, alongside Ket Chun, Prasit was one of the ministry's brains, even though he held no official post. And Mr. Soon Sukun, do you today confirm that Ket Chun and Mr. Prasit were the ministry's brains, and what exactly do you mean by that?
This means that Ket Chun, who used to be the former minister and who had the qualification which was really major amongst the intellectuals. He was a clever person and who strived hard in his research, trying to understand in details for any particular issue. Secondly, he had this personality which was generous and humble, and who could gather as many forces. And as far as I know, he himself never had anyone oppose him in his carrying out of duties. So he had this unique quality that put people at ease through contact with him, and he was a loyal person. Whatever he saw or understood, he would express that opinion without any hiding. But this only applied to the way he spoke to the superior or the leadership, not just to anybody. As for Ieng Sary, he listened to the opinions expressed by other people, and he would appeal to his colleagues and associates to express their real opinions without being afraid, but they shall be responsible in their duties. He always instructed us that if we had any opinion, and whether it is expressed, what would be the consequence of such opinion? Because we were close to the leadership.
Mr. Tunskun, I appreciate you trying to answer my questions and doing so extensively. But my question did not relate to Mr. Yingsari. Perhaps my colleague will have questions regarding Mr. Yingsari later. But I was focusing on the lower downs in Office B1. And so the follow-up question relates to that. But before I ask the follow-up question, you mentioned that Mr. Kitchun had been a former minister. And can you tell us what sort of former minister Mr. Kitchun had been?
President Witness, you do not need to respond as this is not related to the facts alleged. As your response is unlikely to contribute to ascertaining the truth, and counsel, you already have been reminded that you should use your valuable time to put questions which are related to the facts alleged, which would elicit the response for the consideration of whether there exists the guilt or otherwise. And that would be used as the basis for the Chamber's judgment at the conclusion of the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll try to make my question more specific, so perhaps the relevance is clearer. As we are exploring the history of the CPK, and as the Funk and the Grunk are important aspects of that history, can you tell us if Mr. Kitchun had been a former minister in the Funk-Grunk movement?
President Witness, you do not need to respond. The question is irrelevant and further from the facts alleged.
Mr. Kitchun, I would like to show you an excerpt from your interview with the co-investigating judges on the 12th of March 2009. The document number is E3/371, also known as document D143. The English ERN is 002-90412. French ERN is 002-88240. And the Khmer ERN is 002-88233. And I would like to quote from page 5, which has the English ERN ending on 416. And with your permission, Mr. President, I would like to show the document on the screen in Khmer, and we have a Khmer hard copy version for the witness.
The President, court officer, before you put any document up on the screen, wait until you hear from me first. In particular, assistant to the counsel, wait until you hear permission from the chamber before the document can be placed up on the screen. Court officer is instructed to bring the document from counsel to the witness for examination.
While the witness is studying the document, I will read out the relevant passage, and I quote as your answer to a question by the co-investigating judges. And as I have already mentioned, other persons were supposed to be arrested, notably Kit John and Tun Prasit, but Ieng Sary opposed their arrest, explaining to Pol Pot that if Kit Chun and Tun Prasit were to be arrested, he might as well shut down the ministry. End of quote. Mr. Kit Chun, this statement by you at least suggests that Ieng Sary thought that these individuals, Kit Chun and Tun Prasit, were very important people at B1. But I would like to have your understanding of the matter. According to you, were Kit Chun and Tun Prasit indeed important workers at B1?
Response. Mr. President, before respond to this question, I may need to seek consultation from my counsel first. The President, the Chamber does not grant such a request because the question is not self-incriminating. You can only discuss with the jury counsel when you feel that the question or your response will be self-incriminating. However, you should not really respond to this question as it is repetitive. Mr. Sung Sikun, counsel, could you please rephrase or clarify your question when you said the President intervenes? Counsel, could you please rephrase your question? And indeed, the current question was repeated.
Mr. President, I will try to rephrase the question. Mr. Sun Sikun, did you share Ieng Sary's feeling that Kit Chun and Tun Prasit were important workers at B1?
Response. Mr. President, my apology whether I should respond. The President, you don't need to respond to that question.
Mr. President, can I ask for clarification? Because I have not heard so far during Mr. Sun Sikun's testimony him being posed the question.
The President, witness is instructed not to respond to that question because the question is not within the scope of the alleged facts, and indeed it has nothing to do with your client.
I will move on to the next statement, Mr. Sun Sikun, which is document number E3/42. Also known as document D167, and it's a statement you gave on the 6th of May 2009, and I have the hard copy available in Khmer if the court officer wants to provide, may provide the witness with this statement. And the English ERN is 0032722. French ERN is 0032722, and the Khmer ERN is 0032720. And with your permission, Mr. President, I would like to show page 8 on the screen.
The President. International Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames.
Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors and colleagues. My question has to do with the method used by counsel. The last quotation was not word for word in French because the number of the page wasn't given to the interpreters. We are talking of D167 E3. It is important that counsel for non-chair give the exact relevant page so that the interpreters may find the page and quote the passage correctly. Thank you.
Mr. President, I can give the French ERN number for the document, and that is 00327222 until 00327230. I do not have the exact page reference, but all parties here questioning this witness have sometimes been allowed to quote from documents that are when they only have the reference in English and Khmer, or as the prosecutor has done himself, just one language. So I have provided the documents, the page numbers of the document as far as we know them, but the exact reference we do not know. We don't have French language capability in our team to research this type of position. Can I quote the document so that it may also be translated into French?
The President, you may proceed. Court officer is now instructed to bring the hard copy of the document to be handed over to the witness, and the document can now be put up on the screen.
Thank you. Before I quote, I will explain, Mr. Witness, that this is a question that relates to the structure of B1. It is relevant to assess the structure of the people working at B1 and their responsibilities, and that is what the question will address. So I quote your answer on that page. Ieng Sary did not inform me personally. He said that in a meeting of the General Policy Department, if I remember correctly, attended by his closest assistants, Tun Prasit, Ketchon, Tok Kamdon, Oksakun, Chan Yudan, Bebunaret, and myself, and also Mrs. Sose, Secretary of the Party Cell. Full stop. Tun Prasit and Ketchon had been accused of being CIA agents, and the Security Committee had wanted to arrest them. Ieng Sary had explained that the ministry could not work without them. One must understand that he had complete trust in them. All of these people, like me, were part of the Marxist-Leninist group of Khmer students in Paris, of which Ieng Sary was the founder, with Keng Van Sak and Rand Rat Samun. And to further the question, Mr. Sunsukun, is the following, because I want to further understand the structure of B1 and the levels of responsibility. Did you share Mr. Ieng Sary's vision that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs could not work without Tun Prasit and Ket Chun?
Witness, Mr. President, I think this is not a question. He was asking about my opinions. Should I respond to it? The President, you need not respond to the question because you are not supposed to give your opinion on that. You only here are to respond to the question based on what you saw, witnessed. And since the question is repetitive, you should not respond.
Mr. Sunsukun, I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking you to base your answer on your experience working at B1 for several years. In your assessment, could the Ministry of Foreign Affairs work without Tun Tasit and Kiet Chun or not, as seems to be the opinion of Mr. Yingsari?
The President. Witness is instructed not to respond to the question because witness is not an expert to give assessment to that. And also the question was put before. It is repetitive.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will move on to a next document, and it still relates to the structure at B1. And I would like to quote an excerpt from Philip Short's book, Anatomy of a Nightmare. And the English ERN is, the document number, is E3/9. The English ERN is 00396171. French ERN is 00639445, and those are the only two languages in which it seems to exist on the case file. The exact reference can be found on English page number ERN 00396-547 till 48, and especially for the prosecutor, the French exact reference number is 00639901. And with your permission, I would like to show this excerpt on the screen, and I have a copy in French for the witness.
The President. You may proceed. Court officer is instructed to bring the document from counsel to the witness, and the document is allowed to be put up on the screens.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will, in the meantime, read the excerpt that I want to put to the witness, and I quote, and this is a passage which speaks about Pol Pot. It's on English page number 339. And I quote, "The result was that he," and he is Pol Pot, "the result was that he was constantly disappointed by his subordinates' capabilities. That fueled the purge of elements judged to be disloyal. It also made him spend time on trivia that would have been better left to others. Like Sihanouk, who personally inspected the place settings before official banquets, Pol approved the menus for state receptions, sent laundry lists of instructions to provincial officials receiving government guests, chose the announcers for Radio Phnom Penh, and supervised the program schedules. In a society where the word of the king had always been law, initiative was still born. To Sung Si-kun, micromanaging the smallest details was part of Pol's conception of leadership, a firm hand with no sharing of power. He wanted to monopolize everything." End of quote. And Mr. Sung Si-kun, Mr. Shorts quotes your words here, and my first question to you is, do you remember speaking to Mr. Short about the DK regime?
Response. Mr. Philip Shorts was representing BBC in Beijing when I was still working in Peking. I got to know him, and when he wrote the book I took him to see the leaders of the CPK, and in particular the military, and I helped him, and I do not reject that I haven't said anything to him about the CPK.
Thank you, Mr. Soonsukun. That is clear. And my question to you is the following. Mr. Short quotes you as saying about Pol Pot, and I quote, "Micromanaging the smallest details was part of Pol's conception of leadership, a firm hand with no sharing of power. He wanted to monopolize." End of quote. Today, Mr. Soonsukun, do you...
The President, Council, could you please be slower when you read the statement, because the interpreter cannot follow your speed.
My apologies, Mr. President. I will slow down. Mr. Soonsukun, I was quoting from your own words to Mr. Short, and I quote, when you're speaking about Pol Pot, quote, "Micromanaging the smallest details was part of Pol's conception of leadership, a firm hand with no sharing of power. He wanted to monopolize everything." End of quote. My question is, Mr. Soonsukun, do you still stand by that assessment of Pol Pot today?
Response. Mr. President, the question is more about seeking my insight into this. Perhaps it's not in my capacity to respond to that question. The President, it is the text quoted from the book. Have you ever been in contact with the person in the book? Or can you read the message in French? Or does that reflect your recollection? Response. I indeed can read English. English version should be given to me so that I can read the original text in English. Indeed, the book was written in English originally. The President Council, do you think the English version is available so that Mr. Soonsukun can have a copy?
I think Mr. Soonsukun already has a copy. Perhaps the court officer can assist Mr. Soonsukun with locating. It's attached to the French version, as far as I understand.
Response. I can say that what Mr. Philip Shorts wrote reflects my observation concerning Pol Pot's leadership, because I used to live with him for 2 years, and in my capacity working under his orders as well. He was a meticulous person. He of course micromanaging the smallest details. For example, when there was senior guests, he focused his main attention on the food or the catering service. He was engaged in the menu, setting the menu himself. For example, which part of the dishes should be served first, and other parts of the important meals were also considered by him, including texts to be broadcast on radio, who supposed to be the one who makes the editorial or the speech or manage the radio broadcaster would be led or managed by him all alone.
Thank you, Mr. Soonsakun, for that answer. And I would then like to proceed to a next document. It is document D199/26.2.80, 80 that is. It is English ERN 00442300, French ERN 00386-798, and Khmer ERN 00820-658. And with your permission, Mr. President, I would like to show it on the screen, and the original document is in French. So we have the document both in French and in Khmer for the witness in hard copy.
The President, you may proceed. Court officer is now instructed to bring the document from counsel to the witness, and the document is allowed to be put up on the screens.
Thank you, Mr. President. And while the witness studies the document, I will explain that this is a telegram dated the 10th of February 1978. It is from the stems from the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it relates a visit by a Thai delegation to Democratic Cambodia sometime in early 1978. And while the witness reads it, I will read the telegram. The topic line is Visit to Cambodia by the Thai Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the subheading is Khmer Personalities. And I quote, I refer to my telegram number 217. The Thai delegation was officially welcomed by Mr. Ieng Sary, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Pol Pot, the Prime Minister, met with Mr. Upadit and some of his aides. The visitors did not meet the head of state, Mr. Khieu Samphan. Mr. Pol Pot appeared capable, resolute, and confident. He spoke in the first person. He obviously wanted to impress it upon everyone that he is the man who has been running the country since 1975. He also took credit for the policy of friendship with Thailand, saying that he was the one who made the decision to send Mr. Ieng Sary to Bangkok in October 1975. By contrast, Mr. Ieng Sary cut the figure of a lowly, respectful subordinate. He hardly answered any questions immediately. He seemed anxious to always consult a higher or collegial authority each time. In the course of the discussions, Mr. Yengsari also relied on Mr. Thioun Prasit and Mr. Kiet Chun, two seasoned senior officials whose functions within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were not specified. It would be recalled that Mr. Kiet Chun is a former Grunk Deputy Prime Minister, and that Mr. Thioun Prasit, who is also a former Grunk Minister and Health Minister Tun Thioun's brother, travelled with Mr. Yengsari on his tour of the Asian countries in the spring of 1977 and on his visit to the United Nations last autumn. And I have not asked a question yet, but I see an objection from my colleague, so perhaps I should stop here.
The President, Mr. Lead Co-Lawyer for the civil parties, you may now proceed. Counsel Pek Ang. Thank you, Mr. President, Your Honours. International Co-Counsel for Mr. Nuon Chea already read out the document, but before witness responses, I would like to request to counsel for Mr. Nuon Chea or the witness to clarify whether the document has been seen by the witness before the topic can be debated.
I think it's entirely irrelevant to the question, but I do not object to the witness being asked this question.
The President, thank you, counsel for the civil parties. Mr. Suong Sikun, the document that you are reading and requested by counsel for Nuon Chea to be examined, have you ever seen it before? Response, no, I haven't. The President, if not, court officer is now instructed to withdraw the document from the witness, and the assistant to counsels for Mr. Nuon Chea is also instructed to remove them from the screens. The President, you may proceed with your line of question and follow the practice we have been following so far.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Suong Sikun, my first question is, did you perhaps attend this meeting that is described in this telegram, the visits by the Thai delegates to Cambodia in early 1978?
I attended that meeting when the foreign ministers of Thailand that to pay his courtesy to Yengsari. Yengsari at the time was the deputy prime minister in charge of foreign affairs. And besides, I never attended the discussion between the Thai foreign minister and Pol Pot.
So I hear you say that you did not attend the part of the meeting where Pol Pot met with the Thai foreign minister, so I will not ask you questions relating to that topic. In this telegram, it is mentioned that Mr. Kit Chun, according to the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is a former Grunk deputy prime minister. Is that information correct? Was the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs right about this?
President, witness, you do not need to respond as it is irrelevant and it is no use in the process of ascertaining the truth.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the record, I will just note that we are trying to establish a history of the funk and the grunk. That is what I'm doing, and that's what all the parties have been doing. Prosecution, the civil parties, and my colleague for Mr. Kyeozumpan. I'm not sure why we are not allowed to do so, but I will move on. Mr. Soonsukun, at Office B1, was there an office called, or a subsection, excuse me, called the General Leadership Committee?
I have not heard of that committee because at my office the leader was only, or rather Ieng Sary was the only leader.
Then I don't need to ask you any further questions on this topic. Mr. Soonsukun, still speaking about the funk and the grunk, I would like to display on the screen document number D22/185.5, and the French ERN is 00387616 going to 617. The document is only in French, and it's an annex to a civil party application, and with your permission I would like to show it on the screen.
You may proceed. Court officer, could you obtain the hard copy document from the counsel for the witness examination?
And while the witness is reading, I will explain that I want to ask a question about ERN number 00387617. And
counsel, you should ask the witness whether the witness has seen or read this document before. You need to do that first before you can show the document to the witness and ask questions regarding the content. And if the witness has not seen the document or read it, then the document shall be removed from the witness and from the screen.
Mr. President, I of course will respect that ruling, but it seems that you are reversing an earlier position and the way we've been questioning witnesses for a few months now, which is if a witness is in some way related to the subject matter of a document, he can read it and he can comment on it. If this position by the trial chamber is reversed, once again, I'm happy to follow this lead, but it doesn't seem to be fair to change the proceedings in the middle of my examination.
You may refer to any particular document as example to show to the chamber that I reverse my decision in this regard.
We will do so, but again,
As you already raised the matter, you may now try to find any particular document that proves that I reverse the decision in this proceeding.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will do so in writing, as is the way you prefer the proceedings to be conducted. I will, for now, ask the witness.
As you said, there was an existing procedure, and that I now reverse that procedure. You may show me an example or two of such a proceeding where I now reverse as you allege, I reverse the decision regarding the way of putting the document to the witness. So the proceeding regarding the document that was not known to the witness, the documents will be removed from the witness and from the screen. But you may also consider about putting the content of a document without having it shown to the witness or on the screen. That was a separate proceeding. And as you raise the matter, can you just pick one example of the document whereby I might have a different proceeding? Mr. Witness Sung Si-kun, have you seen this document before? Response, no, I have not. President, court officer, can you remove the document from the witness and take it off the screen? Counsel, you can put the question to the witness based on the content of the document without having it shown in full.
Thank you, Mr. President. In this document, under heading 3, which has as a title in French, Gouvernement Pol Pot, on the 6th of January 1979, the following is written: Premier Ministre Pol Pot.
Prime Minister Pol Pot, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ieng Sary. Deputy Prime Minister and Defense Minister, Son Sen. Ministry at the Presidency of the Council, Kiet Chuan. Ministry of Sciences, Chun Mum. Minister of Health, Chun Tun. And Minister of Social Affairs, Social Action, Kyu Tirit. Minister of Culture and Education and Yun Yat.
Of quote. Mr. Sung Si-kun, based on your knowledge of the DK regime, was this indeed the composition of the Pol Pot government on the 6th of January 1979?
Could you please repeat the date because I did not hear it clearly?
The 6th of January 1979. So this is about the time that the Vietnamese took over power in Cambodia.
I see two names which are not relevant to the government of Pol Pot. That's Kit Chon and Chun Mom. Because at that time, Kit Chon was working with me. He was not a minister. I do not know how you council obtained this document.
Thank you for that answer. As I said in my introduction, it's an annex to a civil party application. And just for the records, I will note that in the same document is written on French ERN 00387-616. It gives the composition of the Grunk on the 3rd of December 1973. And there the Premier Ministre is Pennout. The Vice-Premier Ministre et Ministre de la Défense is
the Deputy Minister is Mr. Getchu.
List, but as I cannot put the document to you, I will refrain from asking questions regarding this document. The following documents I would like to show you is the following. It is a document with number E3/1435. English ERN is 00017976. French ERN is 00597811. And the Khmer ERN is 00595262. And with your permission, Mr. President, I would like to show the first page of the document on the screen. It is the statement of the Congress of December 18, 1979. And we have a hard copy for the witness.
Yes, you may proceed. Court officer, could you obtain a hard copy document for the witness?
And my first question apparently is, have you ever seen this document before? And Mr. Soon Sikun, could you study the document in Khmer and English and see if you've seen this document before?
I have not seen this document before. President, court officer, could you remove the document from the witness? And counsel, could you instruct your assistants to take the document off the screen?
Mr. Witness, the document that I just showed you is a statement of the Congress of the Standing Committee of the Assembly of the Kampuchean People's Representatives, the Government of Democratic Kampuchea, the representatives of the Democratic Kampuchea National Army, and the representatives of the various government departments. And it was put on it was on the list of documents provided by the prosecution, and it contains on page 12 of the English version, which has English ERN 000179888 and Khmer ERN 00595-274. Sadly, we do not have the French version. On page 12, under the heading of 3, about the executive body, it states, and I quote, "At the same time, the Congress has unanimously decided to improve the composition of the government of Democratic Kampuchea as follows. Prime Minister, Mr. Khieu Samphan. Deputy Prime Minister in charge of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Ieng Sary. Deputy Prime Minister in charge of National Defense, Mr. Son Sen. Minister for Economy and Finances, Mr. Thiounn Thium. Minister for Health, Mr. Thiounn Thiun. Minister for Social Affairs, Mrs. Ying Terit. Minister for Culture and Education, Mrs. Yoon Yat. Minister of the Prime Minister's Office, Mr. Kiet Chun. Chairman of the National Commission of Sciences and Technology with minister's rank, Mr. Kyun Mum. Secretary of State for Information, Mr. Tuk Rin. Secretary of State for Supply Transportation, Mr. Sar Kim Lumut. And Secretary of State for the Postal Services and Telecommunications is Mr. Chorn Hay. Mr. Soon Sukun, you have already testified that after January 1979, you stayed with the leaders of Democratic Kampuchea. As far as you know, based on your own knowledge, is this an accurate summing up of the composition of the government of Democratic Kampuchea on December 18, 1979?
President Witness, you do not need to respond as it is not related to the facts alleged.
Mr. President, the prosecution has used this document in questioning, and perhaps more importantly, it's mentioned in the closing order directly relating to our client Nui Chia. Paragraph 1581 of the closing order mentions this document. It's being used against our client. So I would invite you to revisit this decision, also because this document is mentioned in 6 other places in the closing order. So although it is dated after January 1979, it is clearly relevant.
President, the prosecution, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our position is that this document is relevant insofar that it supports the paragraphs of the closing order relating to the personalities of the different accused persons, and insofar that it also relates to other Khmer Rouge figures who held ministerial positions. And in that case, it seems to escape the scope of this trial. So if the questions have to be put on the basis of this document, they should only be limited to the roles that the different accused persons played after January 1979.
President, the Chamber already ruled on this matter, so the Chamber will not rule again.
So I understand your ruling to mean that this document can be used for inculpatory purposes, but not to question this witness, to buttress defense theories. Is this how I must understand your ruling?
You already heard the reply by the prosecution, as this document only related to the personality of the accused, and you can put only question in that regard. Your question has nothing to do with the personality of the accused. It is related to other individuals who are not mentioned in the closing order. Of course, we do not forbid you from using this document, but your question is far from the facts mentioned in the closing order. Your question so far only relates to one or two individuals outside the scope of this trial.
Thank you, Mr. President. I respect your ruling. Just for the record, I will note that this document was used by the prosecution in the questioning of witness Sar Kim Lemut only in relation to Mr. Sar Kim Lemut himself. I will move on to the following topic. Mr. Witness, did you, during the regime of democratic Cambodia, know Mr. Hornam Hong?
Yes, I knew him when he was the secretary of the Cambodian embassy in Paris.
And while you were in Phnom Penh in the period 1975 and 1979, did you meet Mr. Hornam Hong during that time?
No, I did not.
Do you know whether or not he at any time was ambassador in Cuba?
I knew that he was the Grunk ambassador to Cuba, replacing Mr. Toi Kham Duen. However, that was prior to 1975. It was within the framework of the Funk, where the King Edward Prince Sihanouk was the chair.
And do you know when Mr. Hornam Hong came back to Cambodia after 1975?
I did not know.
I want to show you a document, and it's document number D366/7.1.564. It is English ERN 000-78096, Khmer ERN 006-36001, and French ERN is 0063091. And I have a hard copy for the witness, if it can be put on the screen with your permission, Mr. President.
Yes, you may proceed. Court officer, could you obtain the hard copy document from the counsel for the witness examination? And also have it shown on the screen.
So, Mr. President, my first question has to be, have you seen this document before? And I can guess the answer as it is in, well, I can guess the answer. Let's put it like that.
No, I have not seen this document. President, court officer, could you remove the document from the witness? And to have it taken off the screen as well. Counsel, can you tell the chamber whether the document has been put before the chamber?
Mr. President, it's on the OCP list E109/4.12 at number 299.
The prosecution, is the information correct?
Mr. President, can you hear me? I do not have the list of annexes before me, but indeed this document is part of the documents that were mentioned in April last year. That is to say, the documents presented by my office.
Thank you. As for the International Council for Noon Cheer, you can rely or refer to the content of a document when you put question to the witness, but you cannot use the exact quote from that document.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is yet again a further refinement of the case law of this chamber, but I will make do. The document apparently stems, and I am trying to paraphrase here, from the Vietnamese archives. It was submitted by the prosecution. It relates the words of Mr. Ho Nam Hong. It is, in fact, a statement by Mr. Ho Nam Hong. And it relates to his periods when he comes back from Cuba. And again, paraphrasing, as I'm forced to, he says that he had been made to attend a study session when he came back, and that study session was led by Thiounn Prasit and by Mr. Kiet Chon.
The President, do you have any other questions to put to this witness? The President continues. The chamber gives you the floor to put questions to witness Suong Sikun.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had not asked my question. My question relates to the structure at B1 and the division of responsibilities. Based on your experience at B1, Mr. Soon Sukun, is it likely that indeed Tun Prasit and Kiet Chun conducted those study sessions that Mr. Hornam Hong was forced to attend?
Response: I don't know. This is outside the scope of my authority.
Okay, and Mr. Tun Prasit, can you briefly tell us what his role at B1 was during the time that you were present?
Response: Mr. Chun Prasit was a member of the general politics of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs chaired by Mr. Ieng Sari. It was a general politics department.
You say it was a general politics department. Could you give slightly more detail as to what his day-to-day functions would entail?
Politique générale is a general policy.
Response: Factually, he was very clear himself, but I'm not quite sure I know what he was doing. I saw him sitting there writing something, and it was none of my relevant duties, and I didn't ask him what he was doing. I thought that he could have been writing speeches or editorials, but I'm not quite sure, and I would not be able to tell you. But I know for sure that he was an interpreter who rendered from Khmer into English and vice versa for Pol Pot.
And do you know whether Mr. Tun Prasit conducted study sessions as the one I just described, or do you simply not know?
Response: I simply not know. The President thanks you, counsel and witness. Since it is now appropriate time for adjournment, the court will adjourn for 20 minutes. The next session will be resumed by 5 to 11. Court officer is now instructed to ensure that Mr. Witness and his jury counsel are properly assisted during the break. The court is adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ